September 15, 2023, at a small supermarket in the suburban area of Escambia County, Florida. It was an ordinary afternoon, or so it seemed. Customers bustled back and forth through the aisles, the steady hum of barcode scanners filled the air, and carts piled high with groceries and everyday necessities rolled toward the checkout lanes. However, in a dimly lit corner near the wine section, a woman named Heather and her 2 young children were quietly enacting a bold and risky plan of their own, concealing unpaid items under plastic bags in their shopping cart. As far as Heather was concerned, everything was going smoothly. With an air of confidence, she was certain that her clever strategy would bypass both store employees and surveillance cameras. She walked toward the exit with her head held high and her expression one of triumphant satisfaction, believing she had pulled off the perfect heist without a hitch. Her 2 children, oblivious to their mother's calculated actions, sat contentedly in the cart, laughing and chatting as if this were any ordinary shopping trip. The kids had no idea that they were caught in the midst of what could only be described as a real-life adventure, one that would spiral out of control in the moments to come. However, Heather's confidence proved to be short-lived. As she approached the exit, a security guard appeared out of nowhere, blocking her path with an authoritative yet calm voice. "Ma'am, please return here for a check." The words hit her like a bolt of lightning on a hot summer afternoon. Heather froze, stunned and bewildered. Her heart sank as anxiety and anger flashed in her eyes. All the confidence she had carefully built vanished in an instant, replaced by the sharp sting of embarrassment and fear. Before she could compose herself, she whipped around and met the security guard's gaze with narrowed eyes, her voice rising to a sharp, defiant pitch. "I paid for everything in this cart. I didn't take anything that wasn't mine." Heather's voice was filled with urgency, stubbornness, and frustration as she gestured emphatically toward the shopping cart, as if proving her innocence would somehow make her case airtight. Her words were loud, forceful, and unwavering, but they did little to convince the security guard. Instead, they escalated the situation from a routine shopping trip into a heated confrontation. Rather than allowing the situation to be resolved calmly, Heather began to shout louder, her voice carrying through the air and creating a tense and suffocating atmosphere in the store. She repeated her claims, over and over, emphasizing that she had done nothing wrong and had paid for everything in full. Around her, other customers began to take notice, their attention now focused on the dramatic scene unfolding at the exit. Heather's voice trembled with panic, anger, and a sense of humiliation as her composure slipped. What started as a simple act of theft quickly spiraled into chaos. From a seemingly small incident, the act of unpaid goods concealed in a cart, came a full-blown ordeal that would last for hours. Heather engaged in an intense back-and-forth with security guards, her voice growing louder as the situation spiraled out of her control. The chaos escalated as supermarket employees, security guards, and eventually police officers arrived at the scene, attempting to manage the escalating conflict. Instead of de-escalating the situation, Heather's behavior added fuel to the fire. Her resistance grew with each passing moment, and her defiance became a full-blown battle between her and the personnel attempting to calm her. The clash was loud, dramatic, and chaotic, drawing the attention of every shopper in the vicinity. The shouts, arguments, and conflicting voices created a symphony of confusion that seemed to take over the entire store. The scene was absurd yet entertaining. Heather, loudly proclaiming her innocence, while security guards and law enforcement struggled to maintain control. The customers in nearby aisles couldn't help but watch the bizarre drama unfold, some attempting to stifle their laughter as the scene grew ever more ridiculous. That afternoon, what should have been an ordinary trip to the supermarket turned into an unplanned performance, with Heather as the star in this chaotic, impromptu drama of stolen goods, shouting matches, and dramatic resistance. Instead of picking up groceries, customers were now witnessing a strange and comedic episode, a clash of nerves, defiance, and a mother's attempt to save face in the most awkward and unpredictable way possible. Heather, a mother trying to balance her role as a parent and financial provider, had embarked on what she thought was a smart, creative, and efficient strategy to save money. Her plan, full of confidence and ambition, was to bypass the typical checkout process by concealing items under plastic bags, relying on her wits and cunning to avoid being caught. She had believed her plan would work perfectly, unaware that this fateful afternoon would turn into a dramatic scene no one could have anticipated. Instead of paying for all the items in her shopping cart, she discreetly and skillfully hid several goods under layers of plastic bags in her shopping trolley, as though performing an intricate artistic maneuver. This was seen as her own masterstroke, a clever tactic she had devised herself, hoping that this strategy would go undetected throughout her shopping journey. Heather was confident that she was intelligent, sharp, and completely in control of every corner of the supermarket, as well as the surveillance cameras monitoring her movements. Meanwhile, her two children, playful, cheerful, and entirely carefree, sat on the shopping cart, their laughter and giggles ringing out like a sweet melody. They were completely unaware of their mother's daring and risky plan. To them, this trip to the supermarket was simply an ordinary outing with Mom, a time to explore exciting new items in the aisles. None of the children could have suspected that they were part of a real-life adventure full of drama, not in a cartoon or fairy tale, but in the unpredictable and chaotic environment of everyday life. Heather's plan, while appearing clever and confident on the surface, was fraught with risk. She hadn't considered the possibility that carrying out Herb's scheme could transform an ordinary shopping trip into a tense confrontation with both the supermarket staff and security. For Heather, everything was just beginning, but she was unaware that the surveillance cameras and the sharp eyes of store employees were already tracking every move she made. However, Heather did not expect that the supermarket security team was well accustomed to situations like this. As she walked past the checkout counter without scanning a few items, a security guard quickly blocked her path. "Excuse me, ma'am, it seems that a few items have not been paid for," he said politely but firmly, demanding that she return. At that moment, instead of cooperating, Heather switched into defensive mode. With a mix of panic and indignation on her face, she shouted, "I didn't steal anything, I just haven't paid yet." Her voice echoed throughout the supermarket, drawing attention from nearby shoppers. Whispers began to circulate, and a few people even pulled out their phones to capture the scene. Heather was invited to the management office to clarify the situation. But instead of maintaining composure, she continued to argue, demand her rights, and provide numerous justifications to defend her actions. She even pointed toward her two children, declaring that her actions shouldn't be considered wrong because she was a mother just trying to feed her children. The atmosphere in the management office quickly became tense as Heather adamantly refused to take responsibility and demanded to be released immediately. "I just haven't paid yet because the scanner was broken," she declared, but the situation had escalated beyond her simple explanation when it was discovered that the surveillance cameras had captured her entire performance. In the security office, Heather's unwillingness to cooperate became evident as she became both agitated and angry. She loudly accused the security guards of being prejudiced against mothers with small children, calling them heartless bullies in a tone that only intensified the already volatile atmosphere. Her accusations not only heightened tensions but also made the air in the room feel even more suffocating. Meanwhile, her two children, oblivious as only children could be, didn't grasp the seriousness of the situation. One of them unexpectedly asked, "Mom, why didn't you scan these candy bags?" The innocent question hit Heather like a bucket of cold water, completely shattering her efforts to defend herself. Despite their efforts to maintain professionalism, the security guards could barely hide the tight smiles forming on their lips as they observed the scene unfold. Heather's face turned an angry shade of purple as she desperately tried to turn the situation around by yelling louder in protest. "Don't listen to the kids rambling. They're just joking," she screamed, but her voice, out of sync and frantic, only heightened everyone's suspicions. In her attempt to maintain what little credibility she had left, Heather stubbornly insisted that she was innocent. However, every action she took only worsened the chaotic situation. Her two children, now sensing that the atmosphere had turned strange, looked at her with a mix of curiosity and worry, adding to the absurdly tragic tone of the unfolding scene. When the police arrived to intervene, Heather immediately began deploying a series of personal defensive maneuvers that were questionable at best, turning the already tense situation into complete chaos. At first, she struggled violently against the officers, pulling at one of their arms as she screamed, "I haven't done anything wrong." When asked to cooperate, she suddenly threw herself to the ground in what could only be described as a dramatic performance, flailing and screaming to give the impression that she was the victim of a brutal attack. Not stopping there, Heather continued shouting accusations, claiming that the police were abusive and racist, while simultaneously trying to draw attention to herself from bystanders. As the officers struggled to lift her from the floor, she suddenly went completely limp, effectively becoming a dead weight and forcing them to drag her across the floor. In the chaos, she accidentally scratched a police officer's finger on a shopping cart, and to make matters worse, she managed to kick another officer in the face while they attempted to restrain her. The situation escalated far beyond the officers alone. The entire supermarket had effectively become a stage for Heather's dramatic performance, with the surrounding onlookers frozen in place, observing the absurd and escalating events. A few of them couldn't help but chuckle at Heather's new style of resistance, while the officers had to grapple with the fact that her actions only added more charges to her growing list of offenses. Handcuffed and dragged into the police office, Heather continued her loud protest, insisting that she was the victim of social injustice. She boldly declared that her treatment was no different from that of an international criminal, despite the fact that the only reason she was being detained was because of unpaid merchandise in her shopping cart. Heather went so far as to accuse the police of discrimination and being harsh, simply because she was from a different area. Meanwhile, the tension escalated even further with the antics of her two children. Completely unaffected by the unfolding drama, the children began to play a game of cops and robbers in the police office itself. One of them shouted, "Mom, I will save you," while the other pretended to be a police officer, making gun-like hand gestures and chasing the other child around the desk. The officers, already exasperated by Heather's actions, now had to contend with two junior accomplices, running wild in the office. One officer sighed heavily and said to a colleague, "I think we need more people here, not because of their mother, but because of these two kids." The entire room was now a cacophony of Heather's screams, the children's laughter, and the chaos that had erupted. Heather's determination to argue her point only added fuel to the fire as she repeatedly stated that her actions did not amount to theft. She kept asking, "What did I do that deserves this treatment from you?" despite the evidence provided by the officers. Eventually, Heather was charged with a long list of crimes: petty theft, assault on a police officer, resisting arrest with violence, and deliberately interfering with the recovery of stolen property. These charges would become a permanent addition to her already lengthy list of bad deeds for the chaotic afternoon. The officers and supermarket employees, in the process of filing their reports, found themselves both confused and amused by Heather's defiant, contradictory behavior. To make matters worse, when informed that all of her actions had been captured on security cameras, Heather, rather than remaining quiet or providing a reasonable explanation, made the shocking admission, "Yes, I took a little, but only to see if you would catch me." This statement was met with shock, laughter, and disbelief from the entire police team, supermarket staff, and even curious onlookers. Heather seemed utterly oblivious to the fact that her admission, made so innocently, had effectively signed her own confession. Her statement was the epitome of both foolishness and irony, turning her from a regular suspect into the unintended star of a real-life comedy. Her attempt to excuse her actions by calling it a small test fell on deaf ears. Instead, it painted her as someone trying to rationalize theft through a strange, convoluted perspective. The phrase, "just to see if you would catch me," not only reflected immaturity but also symbolized the kind of theft that results from hubris and carelessness. As a result, Heather did not gain sympathy or understanding from anyone. Instead, she earned scornful head shakes and mocking laughter from everyone present. Ultimately, Heather had become a cautionary tale, illustrating how criminal behavior can spiral into public humiliation, especially when met with stubborn excuses and blatant denial. Her moment of admitted guilt, while meant to be a kind of justification, sealed her fate and cemented her as a symbol of failed theft, hubris, and misplaced confidence. The investigation revealed that Heather's unusual shopping behavior was both careless and surprisingly elaborate. She paid only for a can of Dr. Pepper, the only item that was scanned properly, while all other items, including snacks, fruits, yogurt, and even a bulky blender, were skillfully, or so she thought, hidden under the shopping bags in her cart. The store security cameras didn't just capture Heather's every move, but also provided a humorous glimpse into her amateurish attempts at deception. While pretending to grab a plastic bag, Heather deftly slid a candy bar beneath a pile of items. When her young daughter asked, "Mom, why aren't we scanning this?" Heather quickly hushed her, replying, "Quiet, this is how Mommy saves money." Heather's attempt at concealment was so unrefined that even the store security guards could easily spot it with the naked eye. However, when asked to stop, she stubbornly maintained that she had paid for everything in full and even attempted to play the part of a wronged mother. The supermarket's surveillance system ultimately became a silent but powerful witness, shattering all of Heather's claims. The camera footage clearly showed her repeatedly placing items into her bag without scanning them. The police couldn't help but laugh while reviewing the footage, which included a particularly comical moment in which Heather dramatically raised her hand to the sky, exclaiming, "I didn't do anything wrong," just as she stuffed an entire bunch of bananas into her bag. In short, Heather's innocent theft attempt not only led to her being caught red-handed, but also became an amusing reminder that hiding techniques rarely succeed, especially when faced with modern surveillance technology like 24/7 monitoring systems. After the incident escalated and Heather was handcuffed, the police officers took her two children away from the scene to minimize further distress and ensure their emotional safety. Despite having just witnessed a series of frightening and stressful events, both children retained their innocence and optimism, waving goodbye to their mother as they were escorted away. One of the children shouted, with an almost cheerful tone, "Mom, don't worry, we'll bring you candy." This moment highlighted a bittersweet contrast. The pure, carefree innocence of childhood clashed with the harsh reality of their mother's situation. Despite the traumatic events unfolding around them, the children's optimism stood out as both heartwarming and profoundly melancholic. Their reaction further emphasized the weight of Heather's actions, as they would now have to grapple with the fallout from this incident while maintaining their innocence. Heather was arrested and charged with a range of crimes, including theft and resisting arrest. To avoid further legal battles and to secure her release, she was forced to pay a $5,000 bail, a significant amount that underscored both her financial and emotional strain. After posting the bail, Heather was released and would return home within the next 2 days. However, the emotional toll and legal ramifications of her actions would linger. Moving forward, she would need to face the challenges of repairing her life, stabilizing her legal status, and supporting her two children, who remained blissfully unaware of the full extent of their mother's predicament. This incident serves as more than just a cautionary tale about theft. It highlights how stressful circumstances, poor choices, and desperation can lead to life-altering consequences. Heather's story is a stark reminder of how even small decisions, driven by financial pressure or impulse, can spiral into a chain of events that have long-lasting repercussions. Ultimately, Heather admitted guilt to all 5 charges filed against her without resistance. These charges included theft, resisting arrest, violent resistance, obstruction of efforts to recover stolen property, and attempting to disrupt the investigation process. Under the terms of a legal agreement, she was spared a heavy criminal conviction, provided that she maintained stable living conditions and refrained from further offenses in the near future. After her release on bail, Heather resolved to be more careful in the future and, more importantly, to never involve her children in such risky behavior again. She learned a painful lesson about the dangers of hasty decisions and the overwhelming emotional and legal pressures that can result from desperate actions. The story of Heather's supermarket theft attempt is not only about a failed theft attempt, but also became an amusing reminder that hiding techniques rarely succeed. A single moment of poor judgment, faced with modern surveillance technology fueled by stress, 24/7 led to multiple charges and a chaotic experience for her entire family. Heather was handcuffed, while the police officers took her two children away from legal penalties to minimize further psychological scars and ensure their emotional consequences of her actions. Despite having just witnessed a series of frightening and stressful events, this story isn't just about retain their innocence and optimism, or family, waving goodbye to their mother as they were escorted away. Making thoughtful decisions. One of the children shouted, temptation with an almost cheerful tone, and despair can lead to choices with devastating repercussions. This Heather's moment highlighted a bittersweet seemingly contrast. Small at the time, the pure, had far-reaching innocence of childhood, not just on her life, with the harsh reality on her of their mother's children who found themselves despite the traumatic events unfolding around them. The moral of this story is clear. The children's optimism every stood out as both heartwarming and no matter how melancholic. Acting out of desperation emphasized the weight of Heather's impulse can lead to as they would now have to grapple with the fallout from this most incident while maintaining involving children in risky actions. Heather was arrested even and charged with a range of crimes can harm their mental well-being and put them in situations that they cannot understand to avoid further legal battles. And Heather's story stands as a reminder to everyone. She was forced to pay a $5,000 bail, live with integrity, a significant amount that underscored both her financial and emotional actions might create. After posting the bail, mistakes may happen, Heather was released, but learning from them can lead to growth within the next 2 days, provided one commits to change and takes responsibility and legal ramifications of her actions would linger. Moving forward, she would need to face the challenges of repairing her life, stabilizing her legal status, and supporting her 2 children, who remained blissfully unaware of the full extent of their mother's predicament. This incident serves as more than just a cautionary tale about theft. It highlights how stressful circumstances, poor choices, and desperation can lead to life-altering consequences. Heather's story is a stark reminder of how even small decisions, driven by financial pressure or impulse, can spiral into a chain of events that have long-lasting repercussions. Ultimately, Heather admitted guilt to all 5 charges filed against her without resistance. These charges included theft, resisting arrest, violent resistance, obstruction of efforts to recover stolen property, and attempting to disrupt the investigation process. Under the terms of a legal agreement, she was spared a heavy criminal conviction, provided that she maintained stable living conditions and refrained from further offenses in the near future. After her release on bail, Heather resolved to be more careful in the future and, more importantly, to never involve her children in such risky behavior again. She learned a painful lesson about the dangers of hasty decisions and the overwhelming emotional and legal pressures that can result from desperate actions.